Tonight, we bring you exclusive special coverage on the Middle East crisis that has gripped global attention. After days of escalating confrontation, U.S. airstrikes on Iranian nuclear sites, Iranian missile attacks on U.S. bases, and Zionist-Iranian exchanges, a ceasefire has now been announced from the U.S. President Donald Trump. But questions remain. Is this a pause or a turning point? Global capitals, from Paris to Washington to Beijing, continue emergency consultations. Oil tankers had already rerouted from the Strait of Hormuz. Airlines suspended flights, markets surged and recoiled. We ask, how did we reach the brink? And is this ceasefire enough to pull us back? This is All 24 News Special. Well, it seems that a war that nearly swallowed the Middle East has come to a close after 12 days of blistering airstrikes, missile salvos, and regional panic. The United States confirms a full ceasefire between Iran and the Zionist entity. But the dust hasn't even settled. Is this a lasting peace or just the eye of a geopolitical storm? Well, we will unpack all these questions, but let's follow this report first.
Just 30 kilometers southwest of Doha lies Al Ubaid Air Base, the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East. For over 2 decades, it's been the nerve center for U.S. air operations, housing more than 10,000 troops, advanced surveillance units, and long-range bombers like the B-52 and C-17. But on Monday, this symbol of American power became a target. In response to U.S. airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan, Tehran launched missiles at U.S. bases in Iraq and Qatar, striking Al Ubaid as part of what it dubbed Operation Herald of Victory. While the IAEA confirmed there were no radiation leaks from the U.S. strikes, satellite images showed major damage at the nuclear sites. In Doha, explosions lit up the sky, but the Qatari Ministry of Defense said missiles were intercepted and no casualties were reported.
Thanks to God, the vigilance of the armed forces personnel and the precautionary measures taken, the incident resulted in no deaths or injuries. The skies and territory of the state of Qatar are safe, and the Qatari armed forces are always fully prepared to deal with any threat.
Still, Doha condemned the Iranian strike as a flagrant violation of sovereignty, warned of possible retaliation under international law. Iran's National Security Council claimed the attack posed no threat to Qatar, but the shockwaves were immediate. Gulf states shut airspace, Air France suspended regional flights, and shipping reroutes sent oil prices soaring amid fears of a broader conflict. As legal and diplomatic fallout spreads, the IAEA is holding emergency meeting, and international law experts warn of escalating risks around nuclear treaties, sovereignty, and war protocols. Meanwhile, Gaza endures relentless bombardment, and the death toll continues to rise in both Iran and Palestine. Security alerts are active, evacuations underway, and diplomacy is now racing against the clock.
And before we invite our guests to the debate, let me share with you the latest. On June 23rd, U.S. President Donald Trump announced that a full and comprehensive ceasefire agreement had been reached between the Zionist entity and Iran. The deal aimed at bringing an end to the recent conflict was described as complete and total. In a statement released on his social media platform, Trump praised both nations for what he called their stamina, courage, and intelligence in pursuing peace. He went on to refer to the recent hostilities as the 12-day war, marking the agreement as a significant step towards stability in the region. Joining us now to unpack the political, military, and economic consequences of this war and the road ahead are 3 prominent voices. From Rome, Mark Lowe, geopolitical analyst. From New York, Mohammed Krissassi, global markets and strategic affairs expert. From London is David Powell, political commentator and author. Thank you, gentlemen, for agreeing to be with us tonight.
Thank you, Karim, and good evening, your honorable panel.
Thank you indeed. So let me start with you, Mr. Marklow. I mean, we couldn't actually get our head around with what was happening. I mean, the question, simple question, what on earth is happening in the world?
Well, if I could answer the question, what on earth is happening in the world, I would probably be able to retire tomorrow morning. But on a more serious note, we all read half an hour ago the announcement on Truth Social that Iran and Israel had reached some form of ceasefire agreement. However, I personally have as yet to read anything coming out of Iran or coming out of Israel. So for the time being, all that I have read is a post by President Trump on his social media platform.
So for you, this ceasefire announcement has no significance whatsoever? We cannot trust the timelines Trump laid out?
I find it quite incredible that we should learn of such if there is, and I repeat, I use the conditional, if there actually has been an agreement between Israel and Iran. I find it quite extraordinary that we should read about it on Donald Trump's social media platform. As I said, I've read his post, but I haven't read any form of comment whatsoever coming from the two nations that are actually involved in the ceasefire. So, let's be absolutely positive and let's be absolutely hopeful, and let's hope that it actually is true and that some form of agreement has been put in place. I find it very hard to believe that it could be any robust form of agreement, but any agreement is a very, very good starting point. So fingers crossed that we will, slightly later on or tomorrow, discover that Trump's post is factual and that Iran and Israel have actually agreed to a ceasefire, which would be an excellent start to what can only be a very long and very, very drawn-out process.
Mm-hmm. Let's bring in Mr. Mohammed Chris Sassi. So, Mr. Mohammed, what triggered Iran's strikes on Al Udeid, and was the US just caught in the Zionist entity's crossfire, or was it perhaps dragged into a trap, a strategies trap, perhaps that benefits the Zionist entity more than the US?
Well, I think, as far as I'm concerned, Netanyahu plays a game of chess with Trump, and he brings him to initiate this kind of attack on the site in Iran. That's for one thing. And the other thing is, now, again and again, I cannot answer your question just as my predecessor was saying. I'm not Madame Soleil, I'm not a magician, and I can read in the mar of coffee. But I'm saying, and it hurts me to say that, but I have to say it, Trump is shifting sand once again. Donald Trump appears to changing the course of history. Or is it the reminiscence of the 60 days negotiation, the 2 weeks delay? This announcement for me of ceasefire, is it a fairy tale? Or is it something that is going to come alive? But for now, up to the moment where we are talking, no confirmation from Iran, neither from Israel. I know it's the middle of the night there, but still. But, well, here we are again with Trump, with this acrobatic movement. It's like his Le Cirque du Soleil or a magic tour. But we are in a war, and it's not a game. But now, if Trump becomes so sophisticated and may have a ray of light to avoid a new 2003 in order to converse this base because the mid-election is coming. But however, I wish that sincerely the madness of war should finish. And I will applaud, and I say, and I have, it hurts me to say that, but my integrity, my intellectual integrity pushed me to say that. I will applaud Trump if the war is over. And even I will be the one who will satisfy this megalomaniac, egocentric persona, and even go to name him for a peace prize like the Nobel Prize, if he can be the new hero for stopping the war, the madness of war in the Middle East. You know, on the day 12, which is today, God forbid, I hope that this ceasefire will be accepted on both sides. And what I'm afraid of Trump, I hope he's not going to be the new Machiavelli, the new Brutus of the history. And we are going to go over in the path of a drama like the Greek tragedy. Why I'm saying that, if you allow me to have just, a few minutes, because I know I have to be brief. Now, I was just hearing right now, before it became the show, it was the siren, and you heard some explosion.
Yes.
At the moment, just, and this is why I said, and again, if you allow me, Karim.
Well, it said that the ceasefire will perhaps take effect after 12 hours, according to the reports that we're receiving. And let me include Mr. David Powell with this question. According to the latest updates that we're receiving here, it says Iran has signaled that it will accept the ceasefire only under Qatari mediation, insisting that Doha play a central role in any de-escalation process. Here, with Qatar now acting, let's say, as a guarantor, how significant is this role in stabilizing the situation, according to you?
It's a strange comment for Iran to make at this point, because I think they probably feel they made a rather strategic error in attacking Qatar in response to the US attacks. They attacked the US base, the main US base in Qatar, but nevertheless, it is a Qatari territory, and the Qatari government responded with outrage. And I think Iran has probably thought that wasn't the best option to make an enemy, in a sense, of Qatar, who had actually condemned the US attacks. So it was a gratuitous mistake on Iran's part, and I think they're really reaching out to the Qatari government to say, okay, chaps, we want you to play a full role. But actually, in terms of mediation, there are only three actors in this: Iran, Israel, and the US. They don't need any outside mediators to come to an agreement. And if Trump has announced this ceasefire, then there must be something behind it. Yes, there'll be a delay, and indeed, strikes are going on by both sides as we speak. But I imagine that by tomorrow morning, sometime there will be a halt. I can't imagine the president would have come out and said this if both sides were going to ignore him.
And Mr. Macro, what do you think? I mean, here, as Mr. David Powell said, Qatar, from the very beginning, condemned the U.S. airstrikes on Iran. And here we see Iran retaliating. And according to a lot of experts, they said it had to retaliate because it would save its, let's say, as they say here, saving face mechanism, or maybe just to restore its dignity, because a lot of people said that it was outrageous, that it was shameful for Qatar not to, or for Iran not to defend its sovereignty and do something about the attacks. But here, they, according to David Powell, they made a strategic mistake, and how this mistake is going to complicate the Tehran-Doha relations going forward?
Well, first and foremost, yes, Iran's leadership had to make a face-saving operation of one sort or another. And we've also seen in the past that Tehran is actually very good at calculating the risks that it takes when Iran's leadership decides that it does actually have to strike back. It's the only, for them, dignified thing to do. They are obliged not to simply lie down, but to take retaliatory actions. on the whole, as we saw, for example, back in old age, 2020, if my memory serves me correctly, when the USA killed the Quds Force commander Soleimani, the Iranian response to that was calibrated. So what are you going to do? You're going to strike against the Americans. Where are you going to do that? And really, your only options are the American presence, the American bases in the various Gulf or Arab states. So you have to choose one. Are you going to hit an American base in Iraq? Are you going to hit an American base in Bahrain? Are you going to hit an American base in Qatar or in or in Saudi Arabia? So there must be some perverse form of logic whereby, and let us remember that according to reliable sources, Qatari sources, American sources, Iran gave ample forewarning of its intent to attack or rather to attempt to attack the American base in Qatar. So it may very well be, and as absurd as this may sound, it may very well be that Iran thought that attacking an American base in Qatar was the least dangerous option. Iran felt that it had to, in order to preserve its dignity, respond to the American attacks. And not in all probability, but quite possibly, the American base in Qatar was considered that between inverted commas, they could get away with. Advance warning was given, protective measures were put in place, and at the end of the day, nothing actually happened. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. Thankfully, there was no particular damage. Now, this will impact the relationship with Qatar. It cannot not impact the relationship with Qatar, but it is a fairly robust relationship. So I'm sure that, and again, read this between 6 sets of inverted commas, they will get over it and continue to assist Iran to find some sort of agreement that will lead to some form of peace, hopefully, but some form of agreement that will allow tensions to calm down and allow people to start sitting around the table. Just one thing, and I'll pass the ball over to somebody else. We also have to distinguish between Iran's nuclear ambitions and the situation with Israel as a nation. They're two completely different things. They are, yes, of course, there are a number of convergences. Israel fears a nuclear-armed Iran. But the root causes of this, certainly not a love, I think we can quite happily define it as a hate relationship between the two countries, has as yet to be addressed. The nuclear issue is one thing. The relationship between Iran and Israel is a completely different kettle of fish altogether.
Thank you indeed. Mr. Mohammed Chris Sassi, back to you. Since we have been following all this mess from the very beginning, could you please help us identify, according to your view, any red lines that have been crossed? And if so, what are they, particularly these red lines? And how might each side, let's say, calibrate next moves to avoid perhaps uncontrollable spiral?
Dear Karim, what can I say? The red line, they were all crossed all over the place. To begin with Israel, since 1996. Accusing Iran of developing a nuclear weapon. 1996 to just 12 days ago, and you know what happened. The red line or Mr. Trump, given 60 days to negotiate. On day 61, Israel get the green light to do what we know what they did. The red light, when you say, I give you 2 weeks to think about it, or give me to think about it, and after 48 hours, you come, and against all regulation from the EAIEA, the Atomic Agency from the UN, you bombard with bomb of 10,000 tons the site of the nuclear site of Iran. If you don't call that red line, I don't know then what you have to call them. And now to answer about Qatar, because I would like to say a word about Qatar. Qatar, my two predecessors, more or less, look at Qatar like it was an innocent victim. Qatar is not an innocent victim. The negotiation taking place in Qatar helped to make believe the Iranian that maybe they are going to have a peace treaty. It was in Qatar, and you talk about spying. Nothing will move in Qatar, not even a fly will move in Qatar without the USA and the Mossad knowing it. That's to make the thing clear. Qatar is not an innocent player. And don't forget, Qatar and Iran have a story. Iraq war, 1980 to 1988, was financed by part of it, Qatar, the GCC plus the Saudi Arabia. So I reiterate, Qatar is not as white as a column of peace. No, not at all. And I'm not going to go there. I'm not a military man, but the open sky for the bombing, etc., etc. Now, again, when we talk about Iran, and then I will follow with what my last predecessor said. Yes, Iran have to answer. It's not a question of saving face. I'm not going to use that word. It's a question of survival. They go to the jugular of Iran. They want to kill Iran. They want to make it disappear. Unfortunately, thanks God, I should say, the miscalculation of Netanyahu, he have to cry wolf and cry baby and ask Trump, and with his dance of Cobra, I should say, he convinced Trump that he have to attack. Now, yes, Qatar is going to have maybe bad night. Let's put it that way. I don't want to use another one. But as my predecessor said, and I agree with him, it was a warning. What Iran did, it was, for me at least, a kind of deterrent. You did a miscalculation in my answer to Israel. I am the first country who, for 12 days, bombarded Israel with the dome. It looked like a Swiss cheese now, and they lack any kind of credibility. But also, I can, with my supersonic missile, do some damage. I told you, I give you the warning. I reached my target. So please now, let's sit down and do something about it. And Trump, his entourage, say yes. Maybe you are not going to go for a repeat of 2003, as I said before. And we are going this time to have a real negotiation. But I still don't believe America. I still don't believe the Zionist state. If you take the history of the region, how can I say, I don't use a bad word, but who scrubbed totally the Middle East? Mm-hmm. America and the CIA. We begin from Syria in the 1946. We go to Mossadegh in 1953. We go to Canal de Suez in 1956. We go to the Seven War in 1967. We go to the Yom Kippur War. We go to Yasser Arafat with the liberation of Palestine. And then, of course, you had Iraq. And who was involved in all of this? America. Why? This is why now I wish this ceasefire will stand up. I wish I'm wrong, but still, I have to be prudent in my comment. And I look at history. And history unfortunately repeats itself. And this is where we are today. Exactly what happened in 2003 with exactly the same players, the nuclear bomb for Iraq, Powell in the UN, with this, and he almost come to the fight with Villepin, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and in the end of it, nothing happened. We didn't find any. But what we did, we leave Iraq in chaos up to the moment of I'm talking now. Mm-hmm. It's still chaos. And I wish, again, I pray, really, for all the innocent victims, can be the Israeli, the Yemeni, the Lebanon, the Syrian, of course, the Iranian. I wish this madness have stopped. Mm-hmm. Why is this madness?
Okay, and since you were speaking about the ceasefire, whether this madness has indeed stopped or not, let me include Mr. David Powell, and just citing a Reuters news agency that says, citing an informed official, Trump informed the Emir of Qatar that the Zionist entity has agreed to a ceasefire. Trump asked the Emir of Qatar for Qatari help to persuade Iran to also agree And Trump and his vice president discussed the ceasefire proposal between Israel and Iran with the Emir of Qatar after Al Udeid attack. And here I underlined after Al Udeid attack. Was this the key moment, or let's say, that blew things out of proportion, let's say, and could have derailed the entire situation into chaos?
Well, we don't know really what went on with this attack. Trump himself in his tweet said that Iran had not only told the Qataris, but told the US that it was going to stage this attack. So it made it, if that's true, then it's even more of a face-saving attack rather than a real attack.
So much for face-saving. If this turns out to be really true, I mean, why are they staging all this and, you know, creating this sense of panic, I mean, among civilians and so on?
Well, because Iran is so humiliated over the last 10, 12 days. It's been totally humiliated. Its leadership has been removed. Its nuclear weapons program is severely degraded, if not finished, and its missiles have been and missile launchers have been steadily destroyed by the Israelis. So they had for their image in the region to do something, and they did this. And I don't think it's going to convince many people that it's a real strike back at the US by Qatar, by Iran. And Trump, in his tweet, by thanking Iran for letting them know in advance, was even more trying to, in a sense, increase the humiliation for Iran, saying this is not a real attack. You can't attack us. So it's a face-saving thing. But I mean, whatever the mechanism for getting this ceasefire, what's happened in the last week is absolutely groundbreaking. For the US to stage these attacks directly against Iran is totally unprecedented. That's the real red line. And the fact that it did it is going to have huge ramifications for the entire region. It's a big setback for Russia and China as well as Iran. That axis of Russia, China, and Iran against American influence in the region has now been set back seriously. Whatever we think of President Trump and his odd behavior and his tweets and his unreliable behavior, this was a major intervention in the region, and it won't be lost on, as I say, outside powers like China and Russia, who themselves have been humiliated. I mean, this is Russian air defenses that have been just shown to be totally ineffective. And there won't be any more drones going from Iran to Russia to be used in Ukraine, for instance. But also, it's going to have big ramifications in the Gulf. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the Gulf states react to this. I suspect that the alliance that was forming, for instance, between Saudi Arabia and China, that'll be in for a bit of a reverse. I think the Gulf states will look now to the US as saying, so the US isn't moving out of the region. It hasn't lost interest in the Arab world and just focusing on China. It still is interested in our region, and I think that's going to be a positive development.
Thank you indeed for all these insights. And let me turn to Mark Lowe here. So speaking of red lines, Mr. Mark Lowe, we have seen so many being crossed, seeing the genocide in Palestine unfolding by the Zionist entity, also looking at how outrageous, some acts of the United States can be in the Middle East with Iran or with other nations that happened, for example, in Afghanistan and so on. So what can we deduce from all this happening? Have all the norms collapsed? I mean, there is no regard to international law.
Karim, I think that we actually have to be very, very blunt here. There has been a categoric violation of international law. It's as simple as that. Conducting an attack on a sovereign state is only justified if there is good, robust evidence to suggest that the state, the sovereign state that you have attacked, is in a position to attack you, and that it has the intention to attack you imminently. Now, was Iran about to attack the United States of America? Was Iran in the position to attack the United States of America? Well, we all have our opinions on that, and in all probability, our opinions are quite aligned. There was no immediate threat to the United States of America, end of story. Therefore, for the President of the United States to unilaterally, both in terms of international law and in terms of the American Constitution, his decision, unilateral decision to strike Iran is a huge red line, because it basically means that might is power. If I am powerful, I can do what I like. I will do what I like, and I'm very, very unlikely to be held accountable for my actions. Or should anyone attempt to hold me accountable for my actions, I shall simply ignore them. So I do find America's attack on Iran as being far more than having crossed a red line. I think that it's very, very dangerous because it creates precedent. And yes, it sends a very, very strong message, and in certain circumstances, this could actually be something that is positive. But we have to be very, very clear. We either live in a world that is governed by international law, in a world where respect for international law is adhered to, or we don't. And unfortunately, what we have just seen is the most powerful nation that the world has ever known, because the United States military power in this moment is the strongest that the world has ever known. We have seen this nation strike a sovereign state without any legal justification. And quite frankly, this is absolutely unacceptable, in my humble opinion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you indeed. And just to speak about the repercussions, Mr. Mohammed Krissasi, of course, according to the updates that we're receiving, the ceasefire and the end of this conflict or war, as whatever you want to name it, is going to take effect after 12 days, 12 hours, from now. But then how will this have affected oil markets and investor confidence in the entire region, in Gulf economies, seeing such, let's say, instability?
Well, this morning I was very afraid about the economical ripple and the trickle-down economics of the market. But now I'm very satisfied. The oil is about $71. It was about 7% increase. The Strait of Hormuz is not closed. Everybody going to their own business in terms of navigation. But I would like, just if you allow me, Karim, what I heard before. What I heard before, that Iran was humiliated. They are very strong words. That I heard that, the first country in the world, not my predecessor, the gentleman before that is going to humiliate Iran. They are going to make them the lucky of the world. I would like to say to the gentleman, when was the last time USA win a war? Vietnam, they lost it. Iraq, they make a mess. They left a cow and they come back with their leg between their tails. With the tails between their legs. I don't know what is the exact formula, whatever. I think you get the picture. And on the top of it, it was both aggression. One small state claiming self-defense, when it's in fact self-aggression. And the state to have nothing to do with that war. Come and goes against all the law in place on the regulation, as I said before, attacking a nuclear site. Who is the kingmaker thinking that they can do whatever they want? The USA with his lackey, Israel. Israel cannot sustain herself or itself for more than a few days if tomorrow America cut the funding of the world, cut the funding of this genocide is taking place. And the gentleman was talking about humility in Iran. Why didn't have a word for what's going on in Gaza? The genocide of 60,000 victims, innocent victims, children, women, killed because they go to they want to have some bread. Why this gentleman doesn't say anything about it? And he told me that Trump is a great leader, great leader over to allow to support a genocidal state who was against all the resolution voting at the UN because they were doing a crime against humanity, and the veto of America, Mr. Trump and all the other before him. I am an Algerian. I'm very proud about what my country did. Not because they were defending Iran, they were defending justice. They asked for justice. Why you have Iran, who have a nuclear plant and you want to effectively develop, and on false pretense, you attack them? Why don't you, Israel, open their lab to the agent of the EIE? Why they don't do it? Why? And another thing I heard now, Trump is a gentleman. It looks like Blanche-Neige. What is this? Which world you are living in? And I don't use other word because I am in public. But you have to think. You have to stop this madness. The king philosopher of the Greek philosophy, the proletarian and the slave, it doesn't exist anymore. We are in the 21st century. We have 70% of the population in the Middle East that have less than 40 years old. They all have this telephone here. We don't wait for the information that this gentleman, the first gentleman was saying, coming and chanting all this wonderful song about Mr. Trump.
Well, to his defense, maybe we just need to bring David Powell here just to answer your questions, Mr. Mohammed Krissassi.
Please. I would like to hear his answer.
Yes, Mr. David Powell?
Which particular question do you want me to address? I mean,
well, I just wanted to give you room for you to respond to Mr. Mohammed Krissassi.
Okay. Well, if we're talking about why do we talk about the Iranian nuclear program and not the Israeli nuclear program? And the answer is simple. Israel has not threatened to wipe out another state. Iran has threatened repeatedly to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Now, you might think that's a perfectly reasonable goal to have, but talking
Mr. Mohammed Krissassi, let him please finish.
Could I just finish the point? It's important to understand your enemy. If you think Israel is your enemy, you need to understand Israel's strategy. Since October the 7th and the Hamas attack on Israel, the strategy in Israel is not just to re-establish deterrence against its enemies, but to deny those enemies the means to attack it. So if Iran or any other power constantly says that they are going to destroy Israel, and the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei only last week called Israel a cancer in the region. He repeatedly says that. Israel is not prepared, and nor is the US, to allow a country who has an ideology to wipe another state, a UN member state, off the face of the earth, is not going to allow them to develop weapons of mass destruction. It's as simple as that. That's the reason for the attack that Israel waged and that the US came in to support, because they felt that Iran was on the verge of weaponizing the highly enriched uranium that it's developed and putting it in missiles. And they've announced publicly that in the next 3 years, they're going to develop 10,000 long-range missiles capable of carrying either 110 conventional warheads or nuclear warheads. So that is not something that Israel is going to accept. And you might not like it, but that's a fact. It's simply the strategy within Israel. You have to understand, Israel's strategy is if our enemies have the means to attack us, we will not allow them the means. And we see that in the attacks on Hezbollah now, even though there's a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, there are attacks regularly because Hezbollah is trying to rebuild its capability within Lebanon, by the way, undermining the sovereignty of Lebanon, if we care about that. So it's quite clear that Israel will keep doing this. And if there is a ceasefire, then that's fine. But if Iran continues to develop nuclear weapons, then we'll be back into another confrontation, because international law has nothing really to say in this. It's a question of power. Iran is giving itself the means to project power in the region, and if it's going to project lethal power against another state, namely Israel, then they're going to respond. And it doesn't matter what the UN or the EU or the ICC or any international body does. It's a question of survival. That's how Israel sees this. The war in Gaza is a separate thing, and it's extremely unpopular within Israel, and that we can talk about that. But as regards the threat from Iran, it's the overwhelming majority of Israelis back the government in doing this. It's not just Benjamin Netanyahu deciding off his own head to do this. This has firm and national backing, because they see this as an existential threat to the state of Israel.
Very good indeed. I think the point is quite clear. Mr. Mohammed Kourisasi, would you like to add something?
I would like to be polite, and I give a very polite answer. Don't come to me here on the show and sing me, being the echo of the Zionist policy. Don't forget that Israel was created in 1942, not by itself, by two countries. La solution à deux États in 1948. Regarding Iran, as far as I'm concerned, Iran never attacked Israel. And now we talk about the rhetoric. We can talk about rhetoric. I would like you to go to the cabinet of Mr. Netanyahu and heard what his extreme right minister of education, of justice, of commerce, saying about what you said, the survival. Now I should say the non-survival of Iran. Israel never been attacked. Israel by itself was created in 1948. You know why? Because of the guilt of what Europe did to them. Just for memory, the pogrom of Budapest, the pogrom of Hungary, the Christian Night of 1936, was not done neither by Iran, neither by the Arab. It was done by European country and the Veldiv of France, Dachau, etc. And I go further. Since you are talking about the right, the survival, Iran have the right to defend itself as well. And this is all what they do. You talk about America. What do they have America to do there? Why did they push the war for 8 years against Iran? Why you don't say a word about Netanyahu lying in the area of, I'm sorry guys.
It's okay. Let me bring here Mr. Mark Lowe to include him in this debate. Mr. Mark Lowe, what do you think of these exchanges between Mr. David Powell and Mohammed Kourisasi regarding the having, let's say, the right to defend one's country?
Right. I mean, without any shadow of doubt, David does not need me to defend himself. He can do that perfectly well. But what I would like to say is that what David offered was a truth, a simple truth. There are pragmatic reasons why operations that were conducted were conducted. We might disagree with them. We might prefer to see different solutions. But what David has done is to quite simply answer a question, and it is, why was Iran attacked? There can be no denying that over the past 4 or 5 decades, 4 decades, I beg your pardon, I know time is flying very, very quickly, but I'm exaggerating, Iran has on numerous occasions, including very, very recently, made very, very clear what it would like to do with or to Israel, how it considers Israel, and how we would like Israel to finish. So anybody in Israel has to take these threats very, very seriously. Now, I personally don't know, and I will never know, at exactly what point Iran was in its development of a nuclear weapons capability. There are people who are far, far better informed than I am. There are agencies that exist to gather information, to conduct analysis, to come to conclusions, and to give advice to government.
Yeah, but
Now,
don't
I
we
don't
find it a
know
little fishy when we hear about the Zionist entities, speaking of Iran within weeks and within months of creating a nuclear bomb and finishing their arms and so on. And we have been hearing this from him for almost 30 years, or I think it is 30 years, since 1992.
Yes, Karim. Likewise, Iran being on the verge of acquiring a nuclear capability is an opinion, is a conclusion that we have all heard again and again and again over the past 30 years. And nothing ever happened, basically. This nuclear weapon never appeared. That said, and I repeat, I'm not in the position, none of us are in the position to know exactly how advanced Iran actually was. There were presumably grounds, robust, decent grounds for those in Israel, in the Israeli government, to make the decision that was taken, and the results we know. Now, one thing is to agree or to disagree with it. Another thing is to be absolutely honest and say, again, I agree or I disagree. That's irrelevant. I put myself in Israeli shoes. What would I do? So you have to be pragmatic. We would all love to live in a world ruled by law, where in a similar context, Israel would go to the United Nations Security Council, etc., etc. But unfortunately, as David pointed out, that is not how the world works.
And since you brought up international law, let me get back to Mr. David Powell, just to ask him this question. Mr. David Powell, has the international community lost its grip and control on all of this? I mean, the respect of humanitarian rights, the respect of international laws, the non-proliferation of, let's say, nuclear weapons and so on?
Well, has international law lost the grip? Well, I can't think of an example where international law has actually stopped any state developing nuclear weapons. We are where we are. I mean, you can say it was unfortunate that North Korea developed nuclear weapons. It's unfortunate that China perhaps has nuclear weapons, but I mean, it's a fact. And I think the US, irrespective of the Israeli angle, was looking at the world and thinking its four principal rivals, antagonists, if you like, around the world are Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. Now, three of those powers have nuclear weapons, and the fourth was about to get it. And I think that's why the US acted now, not only because of the Israeli warnings, but it didn't want its fourth rival in the world to acquire those weapons, especially because the regime in Tehran is not like a normal regime. It's not like a normal country. The Islamic Republic works on an ideology that doesn't put the national interest first. I mean, they've ridden roughshod over the welfare of their own people, for instance, to fund this nuclear program, which has cost around $500 billion over the years. And what has it achieved for Iran? Absolutely nothing. About 1-2% of its electricity, and it's given it pariah status around the world. So I think there's no enthusiasm within Iran for this nuclear program. I mean, it's simply the regime itself. So the hope is that once the dust has settled in this latest this latest escalation of the war, that there will be a change of heart. I think that's what's the US is hoping, and I think Israel is probably hoping, because there will be a change of heart within the regime to say, you know, nuclear weapons, they're not going to guarantee our safety. They're actually a threat to our safety. So we don't need them. And we'll put them aside. And then there won't be any talk of regime change. I don't think either the US or Israel or anyone else wants to get involved in trying to sort out another country like Iran. As my colleagues have said, in Iraq, it was an utter failure. I don't think the US is in the business of changing regimes and rebuilding them. They hope that something will change within the regime to make it a more rational, normal functioning state, rather than a revolution that's trying to export its revolution across the region, which has been an absolute disaster to Arab countries across the region, from Lebanon to Yemen, Syria, and the Palestinian territories, all devastated by Iranian influence. And I think the hope is that the regime in Iran, it's not going to fade away. It's a very strong regime. The one thing it can do is stay in power. It knows how to oppress its own people to stop any demonstration or coup from within. So I don't think we're going to suddenly see the regime crack. The hope is it becomes a more rational regime and looks at the world as other states look at the world. You know, there's a threat to us. These are allies with us. We think in rational terms, not we're on some millennial campaign to wipe out the Jewish state. Because what's that going to achieve? If they drop a nuclear bomb on Israel, it'll be the end of the Palestinians as well. It'll be the end of Jerusalem. I mean, that's not a great thing for any theocratic regime to try and achieve, is it? So
yes.
The hope is we become a more rational state.
And Mr. Mohammed Chris Sassi, I mean, according to David Powell, maybe the ideology in Iran poses a problem, especially when we have a regime that keeps threatening another nation and wants to wipe it out of existence. Now, what is the norm? How can we be accepted in a global, let's say, system where we can please other societies and just live and coexist?
Well, I just like to give a short answer. Look around the world and who are initiating the war. Just look around the world. Look at the world and who dropped the nuclear bomb on a nation. I'm talking about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Look at the world that make a war in Vietnam and the way they were conducting the war. Did they respect the human rights? You are telling me now that America is an example of decency. You are telling me now that Israel is an example of decency. Yes, Iran has its own challenge. I'm not defending a regime. Number one, I don't like the term regime. Iran, their president was elected. It's not because the result of the urn, we don't like it. That is become a regime and not a democracy. It doesn't work that way. If I talk, I live in the state, I love this country. I have my family here, my children. It gives me some opportunity, but it gives me the right to criticize my country. I don't like actually the way that Donald Trump is buffing all my rights because I'm an Arab Muslim. I don't. And if you look at the news, all these people were arresting, but I don't blame this country. I love this country. We, the people, is part of me. I don't agree with the policy. But you know, why don't you allow the other country to have the same? Why we are trumpeting the right? Look at Ukraine. What's going on in Ukraine? Why nobody is going to say Putin and we are going to attack you, Mr. Putin? Why they don't go to China? I am a Muslim.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Mohammed Sassi. Unfortunately, we have run out of time.
China. Why China? They slaughter the Muslim people.
Point clear, Mr. Mohammed Krissasi. Unfortunately, we are running out of time and I need to wrap up. Thank you so much for all these insights to all my distinguished guests, David Powell, Mark Lowe and Mohammed Krissasi. So the bombs may stop in the near future, but the aftershocks are just beginning. As Iran and the Zionist entity exchange handshakes from afar, the region remains on edge. The question isn't just whether the ceasefire will hold, but whether the world has truly learned the cost of brinkmanship. Thank you so much for following, and good night.